Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and in this video we're breaking down Alien Earth. The finale is now here, and episode 8 sends things off with a bang. Though this closes out the arc of the first season, there's also still a lot left up in the air for season 2. I know some people might think it's disappointing, but in terms of wrapping up a story to a certain point and then setting things up for the future, I think it does a good job of, closing out some things but also laying the groundwork for what's coming. Now, it's a very bittersweet ending. Though the kids come out on top, there is that invasion by Weyland Yutani on the way. We also have the fact that the Occellus is out there and it's now infected Arthur's body. And I have to say, theory confirmed, motherfuckers! Theory time shut down? Nah.
I want you to put the word out there that we back up.
I got one more in me! But anyway, this episode was packed and I want to break it down, but let's discuss that ending first.
Now we rule.
So we end with the kids in charge and the adults locked up in what look like UFC or WWF lions den cages. This is what was initially used to house the synths, but the security measures were worse than Arkham Asylum. After the events of last week, all the kids were locked up, just like how all the Lost Boys ended up captured in Peter Pan. Tinkerbell herself was locked up in a lantern, which the hybrid cell looks eerily similar to. Now in the book and film, the Lost Boys and Darlings were given two choices. They could either walk the plank or get in line, which I felt was similar to how the kids here had to toe the line or end up in the cage. In Peter Pan, the kids also end up winning, and they use Captain Hook's ship to return to London. This is similar to the show where the hybrids also end up taking over the facility. Boy Cavalier's just like Peter Pan in that he didn't really want the kids to grow up, but in the end, even he seems to relish their plan, just like the real Pan. In that story, Wendy was desperate to finally grow up, which is also something that Wendy wants here. Peter Pan continued taking Wendy's relatives to Neverland in her daughter Jane, and I feel like Boy's gonna do something similar. He has of course brought his brother Joe to the island, but I do think that he might even create a synth version of her father, especially with what we get confirmed about Adam Eanes. Which is another theory time confirmed! I'll not do that. I'll stop doing that. In the end though, the adults are surrounded by their worst nightmare, which is a xenomorph and some crazy synths. The xenomorph is of course the crocodile from the novel and movie, and Morrow lost his hand like Captain Hook. The creature has somewhat followed him throughout the series, albeit different versions. What we end with though is the patients running the asylum and Yutani's forces closing in for something they aren't quite ready for. Noah Hawley's discussed in interviews how the show will be a mesh of the fears around nature and technology. The specimens represent the former, with the hybrids and synths covering the latter. Hawley talked about how we have this inbuilt fear of nature and technology, as both of them are either trying to kill us or replace us. And the fact the pair have now joined forces makes this ending even more terrifying. I have no doubt Yutani's gonna get wrecked and then the island itself may be destroyed. There's gotta be a reason why we haven't heard of Prodigy down the line, and I feel like that will be the focus of season 2. Okay, so we open with the recap from last week, which also scans over the xenomorph's body. This is left on the screen for a lot longer than usual, highlighting how the beast is now beginning to take over. Even though Wendy controls it, you have to ask if it's had this corrupting influence. I feel like they see themselves more as kindred spirits, and they enable each other to go down a dark path. Not that the xenomorph was being nice to everyone, but you know what I mean. From here, we then cut to the beach to see poor Arthur's washed up on the shore. It's akin to the doll's head from the opening of episode 4, and his body will be controlled by one once the eye gets a hold of him. Shoutouts to my mate Big Dave English, who had a great read on it and how it connects to the rest of the franchise. He pointed out that when Ripley first tries to get Newt to sleep in Aliens, she checks inside the doll's head for bad dreams. Newt replies, "She can't have bad dreams. She's just a piece of plastic," which I'm paraphrasing. The doll appearing here though may speak to the company seeing the hybrids as empty disposable toys with no real soul. In reality though, they actually can have bad dreams and can't suppress emotion, which is what Newt's forced to do in order to survive. The doll and now Arthur washing up on the beach coincides with their various mental states unraveling. The doll could also be symbolic of the children and how they came to the island broken and were turned into shells without any real voice or emotion. Or so the companies thought. The doll could also play into Nibs and her toy. Newt talked to the doll to comfort herself but knew it wasn't real. Nibs though, she thought her toy was real and spoke to it as such. Also, Newt doll sinks into the water when she loses it, and Nibs' toy also gets chucked into the water as well. This is what made her snap and rip that guy's jaw off, showing her loss of innocence was complete. So this speech, water, and dolls and people being puppeted, it's all really symbolic to the franchise, and shoutouts Big Dave again. Turned into literal crab food, we see one set on his chest and the xenomorph approaches it. Crabs, scorpions, ants and bees, they were all things that inspired the design of the creature. So having one set over Arthur's chest wound is a very nice touch. It's an opening that's also akin to the beach scene in House of the Dragon, and also the moment in Jaws where the police find the young woman. The crabs are feasting, and it looks like it's protecting its food as the xenomorph comes sniffing around. The creatures are interested though, as they usually only kill to defend or take humans to use as incubators for chest bursters. And it may even be looking for its little bro. I think what happens with Arthur though is absolutely horrific, and not only did he lose his wife, he lost his life and now was losing his eyes, which sort of rhymes. It all kind of builds towards though one of Boy's original goals. He wanted to test the Occellus on animals and then take it to an actual human, but not a smart one like me, smartest man alive, but someone with a low IQ like those guys at Screen Crush. This would actually help to test whether it improves the species' intelligence or if it's only able to go to a certain level. Arthur was of course a scientist, but its death will likely have killed his brain cells. I do wonder though if some of his memories will remain, including his last wish. Arthur wanted to be reunited with Dame for one last time as they ended things on a bad note. So him being puppeted around and then coming across her is something I think will be a big scene in season 2. The Occellus is able to turn a sheep into a deadly being, and with it being in the head of someone with 6 degrees, I think it's going to prove very, very deadly. The eye takes over the pathways to the brain, meaning that it takes over the neurotransmitters. So with Arthur only recently dead, these might still be intact, and the Occellus will be able to pilot the scientists like a robot. Or like that alien in Men in Black. Now in these breakdowns, I've often talked about how the island takes what seem to be innocent ideas and then twists them into something dark. Dame in episode 2 talked about how they managed to end death here, and Arthur has somewhat defied dying. Kind of. We also know that they couldn't have kids, and him giving birth to the chestburster was again a twisted version of that. In the end though, he's just going to be another variable for season 2 as Yutani heads to retrieve their assets. Kind of mirroring how Boy Cavalier sent his security team and hybrids to the crash site only for untold horrors to occur. Sort of like poetry they rhyme. Now Boy also wanted to put the Occellus in a mold scrubber, and that line gets a nice little payoff. We later see Joe's mates going through the facility and they're trying to extract people when they hear something. Turns out to be a mold scrubber, but it was just an amazing piece of continuity in writing. Either way, from the crabs we continue with the xenomorph as it stalks in the jungle. It reminds me a lot of the stuff from the DC Aliens crossover, where they'd often have the creatures in jungle-like environments. It's looking for its mummy, and it comes across Dame as she goes to visit the kids' graves. Now, we have mentioned quite a lot how she sees the kids as her own children, as she and Arthur couldn't have them. So no doubt they threw themselves into the hybrid work, and even in the face of Boy being Cavalier, she still said she didn't take the children's deaths lightly. She puts a flower on Jean Meter's grave, which we later learn is Curly's real name. It's also very similar to how the kids were given a flower just before they died. I did say last week how this gravesite had probably been forgotten about, and this was due to it seeming like the kids were alive in the machines. However, we can tell by the rotting flowers on the grave that Dame's been coming to the site regularly. The stones themselves, though, are very corporate with just the names and a little bit of colour. However, there isn't much else. Clearly the corporation didn't really care about the kids enough to get to know them with personalised gravestones, and they seem to be as much a corporate shell as the machines are themselves. Dame is trying to give life to it by placing the flowers, but I think deep down there is that side of her that knows they simply died and just copied across their consciousness. However, she does speak to Marcy's grave in a way that shows she believes she's still going through growing pains. So she sees the kids as alive. But yeah, she's visiting the grave where Marcy's body's buried at and is clearly very conflicted. Again, playing off the whole twisted notion of death here. I still wonder though if the kids were actually dying or as close to death as they were initially made out to be. We saw how Marcy was given what I assume was chemotherapy, as she mentioned radiation treatments. It explained how she lost her hair between writing the letter and when we saw her put in an adult body. The other kids apparently had rare diseases, while Wendy most likely had a form of cancer, but I think in this day and age in the future there would have been a lot of things that they could have probably cured. I actually think we might get some dark information released from Arthur's brain if the Occellus can indeed access memories. This could expose the fact that they didn't necessarily have that big death sentence that Boy told them they had. The fact she says growing pains could also refer to a couple of things. The kids seem like they were in their tweens or even their early teens when they were put into those adult bodies. It's of course a pivotal time, as I'm sure you know, as your body changes and you start to experience really complex emotions, which you can't often fully process. The kids are constantly in a state of flux with their emotions, they're constantly teens, and yeah, though they're in adult bodies, I can't imagine anything worse. The corporation simply don't care though, and they were just a product to be presented to investors. Because of the time they were swapped across, they're probably always going to be in this hormonal teenage state, which yeah, I don't think anyone on the island wants to deal with. They know so little but think they know best, which leads to the whole island being brought down. Though Boy was obsessed with keeping people young, I think in the end that's not the way to run things. Growing pains could also refer to her struggles with the adult world, which does make sense. We then hear a branch snap which makes her look back and see the big old attack dog drooling in her face. It's akin to a lot of the attacks that we've seen throughout the franchise and reminded me of the really iconic image of Ripley and the creature from Alien 3. Luckily though, Joe's friends come to save the day. I did wonder why they didn't use that taser weapon because we have seen that it definitely stuns it. But then again, all season long I've been wondering,
did IQs just drop sharply while I was away?
the Xenomorph then heads off to Rip, and I love the bird's eye view where we can just see bodies in the courtyard. It's massacring people everywhere, and it looks kind of like the ending of Gen V Season 1. Now typically Xenomorphs don't actually kill, as they normally grab people and then take them to the hive. Stuff like Dallas in the Vet and Alien, and hell, even the one saving Rain from falling down the shaft in Romulus, that was all done to take humans to the hive. This is where they're infected with the chest bursters, so they can then go and create more Xenomorphs. Even if it's just by itself, it tends to find an area where it can take them to build a hive. The fact it's doing this though and killing people outright could highlight it's found its queen in Wendy. It likely knows that she won't be producing eggs and thus there's no point in taking people away. It's a total bloodbath though, as the comms are down and the island's cut off from everyone else. Sadly they said they wanted to remain on the island because they knew where the monsters were, but we see how stupid that is. And me, I'd be swimming to New Siam as we speak.
Yutani is jamming the satellites. We're cut off.
I love the way Adams Eames reports this to Boy, and it's a very cool voiceover. It just sets a somber and dire tone for any humans left alive on Neverland and dispels any idea of escape. We can even see the degradation manifest in the mold on the walls, and we first saw the scrubbers in episode 1 cleaning away this rigorously. Hawley had cleared this up though and said that they had to constantly keep this in check. I love the symbolism of the mold though, and how as the island's falling apart, this is manifesting everywhere. We also learn that the hybrids are kept in a cell, but it's not actually designed to contain synthetic beings. And yet, surprisingly, doesn't go to plan. This sets up their easy escape, and also the fact that the humans will be held here as long as the hybrids want.
I'm not sure how long it will hold if they decide to break out.
We also get some cuts of the Native American figures from the kids' rooms. Initially, I thought this was a nod to Peter Pan, but I do wonder if it's also a comment on a foreign invader coming in to slaughter a population and then take the land, which definitely feels apt. The adult Xenomorph is on the loose, but the security staff keep getting picked off and the island is woefully understaffed, making a fight against Yutani's troops almost impossible anyway. As a big cyberpunk fan, I also love the idea of the corporations fighting against each other and it basically being like a good old war. Whereas countries used to invade other countries, corporations now invade other corporations. Even the name Weyland Yutani hints to how the latter took over the format.
Have a good journey, Mr. Weyland.
This was in the wake of the Weyland's death in Prometheus, and it allowed Yutani to seize the corporation easier. Corporations basically run the world now, and they've superseded governments due to them controlling every aspect of life. Hell, I bet even Amazon could do it right now if they wanted to, because I basically buy everything from them. This is also why Boy referred to his city as his citizens, because he's now more like a head of state. I think one of the best things the show has done is expand upon the state of the world, as we never really saw Earth that much in the original movies. It's a great comment on corporations, capitalism, and ultimately what often brings empires crashing down and how it's normally something from within. This is exactly what's going on here, and Atom basically rattles off how screwed they are. Boy is disinterested though, as he just reminisces back to when Marcy was transferred into Wendy's body. It's the same scene that we saw at the start of episode 1, however here we see her stand up and adjust to her new body. It's kind of like a baby deer standing up for the first time. Very Bambi-like. It's something that was kind of glossed over in the show, but I think Noah did a great job with how it's presented here. We go from here struggling like a deer to then panning over to the infected sheep, and it's a nice way to show how these horrors have infected the island. We then see her fall down, only for it to then cut to her in the jail cell. This is expert shorthand for showing her growth and what happens when she learns to stand up for herself. Ultimately though, it all comes crashing down. Boy's attention is then immediately drawn to the sheep and he says,
"Things you've seen. Yeah, that really would be an interesting fucking conversation."
This calls back to his conversation with Dame in episode 2.
I want to talk to somebody smarter than me.
Thanks.
He wanted to finally have an interesting conversation, but he's very up his own arse. Like, he thinks he has a brain the size of the galaxy. No one so far has been able to satiate his desire for a good conversation, and honestly, I doubt they'd even be able to have one that interested him. He thought Curly could after he gave her some reading material, but now he thinks that Occellus might finally give him what he wants. I was hoping that the eye would infect him for the finale, and we then get some sort of Resident Evil 3 type ending. However, he ends up locked in with the rest of the adults, but we do get an insight as to why Boy's mind's been all over the place this season. Kirsch later explains,
Sir, a defining symptom of ADHD as severe as yours is impulse control problems.
this is so severe he actually has to take pills for it, and his mind constantly jumps from obsession to obsession.
Let's fucking go!
It explains why he keeps switching his focus from the hybrids to the xenomorph and then to the Occellus. It's also why he just wants an interesting conversation, as this might finally keep his focus. He's just bored with everyone around him, and they all struggle to keep his attention.
Why don't you grow some balls?
We then finally catch up with Joe, who's been put in a cell with Morrow, which seems like a recipe for disaster. The cyborg's also being given a metal cuff around his cyborg parts, which I really loved. Joe has versions of his sister screaming though, and clearly has a lot of regret. It's here that we then jump to the hybrids. Curly says she's the favourite and shouldn't be here, and it's very clear that people think she's the snitch, including me.
You snitched.
Curly says she didn't know, but yeah, she's the only one who knew, and Arthur also disabled the trackers. As I mentioned, we saw her shoot her shot with Boy, only to end up being belittled by him when it turned out Wendy could talk to the xenomorphs. So she's constantly just getting the wrong read of the situation. Though she thinks she's the favourite, the only favourite of Boy is Boy himself.
Let's fucking go!
On a side note, Samuel Blankins is just very good as the smarmy dickhead. Let's just hope he's given good material when he returns in Netflix's The Watcher, which I think is gonna be great.
You serious?
Did make me laugh though when Smee asks if they told on him, and she's like,
No, I don't even know what you did.
yeah, I don't know if you want to know, because that side quest was a side quest from hell. Now, I have been talking to Griffin from FilmSpeak a lot about the series, and he came up with a really interesting read on Nibs. Guy's much better at analysing stuff than me, but he said I could steal it, and he had lots of thoughts on the memory wipe and what the series is doing with Wendy. He said that Alien has always felt a bit like a female agency metaphor, and like a metaphor for birth and reproduction.
My.
Nibs had the feeling of being impregnated by the alien, and even though it was fake, her experience was real to her. In many ways, the clinic more or less forced her against her will to get an abortion because it went against the image they wanted to present with the synths.
Immortal for a low, low price.
Sweeties, you're floor models.
They robbed her of her agency and also her mind.
What's wrong with me? I don't have any of that.
She had no say in the matter, and I think that messed with Nibs even more. The fact that her body is no longer her body and that she doesn't have a choice is something that destroys her. She may not be physically pregnant, but she feels it, and their solution is to erase her memory and erase that part of her. The way the eye attacked her could also be seen as an assault, and due to the sexual nature of the Alien franchise, like with all the male sexual assault, you could see it as being a violation that the company now just want to sweep under the rug. They only want her to present as human, they're not actually interested in all the baggage that comes with that. Griffin said he thinks that also starts to eat away at Wendy. She fully believed that she was human, but then she starts to harken back to things like what Kirsch said about her emotions and seeing the world for the way it is, rather than how she feels about it. In the end, she starts to believe, well, if I'm a machine, then I might as well just cut off my emotional attachment because it's not doing me much good. I think the thing with Nibs disturbed her immensely and put everything into perspective. If humanity is all about playing God, cutting things open and seeing what's inside simply because they can, then she just wants no part of it. Which is also sort of the rebellious side that Wendy had in the book when she stood up to her parents in Peter Pan. There, she didn't want to grow up because of all that comes with being a woman, coming into maturity, but then once she realizes that staying young forever is arguably worse, she starts to have a change of heart. Griffin even said that Wendy might come around again in season 2, as she's in her rebellious stage at the moment. And I definitely agree with that, and go and check out his channel at FilmSpeak, as I know he's doing a video on the series, which I think will add a lot of interesting things. And he also edited this part of the video, so it's very fourth wall breaking for him now, getting a shout out while editing it. Wendy then talks about how they found their graves, and this is how we learn that Smee's named Christopher, and also get the confirmation with Curly being Jane.
Jane.
Tootles, aka Isaac, was also called Stephen.
Yes, I think that's right.
His mum actually used to call him Steve-O. Not that one.
No. Okay, I'm the favourite. I'm not supposed to be here.
Which is Curly once more reassuring herself that she matters. How about Wendy shuts this idea down for good and says,
No, in the book, Wendy Darling is Peter Pan's favourite. And then she grew up, and that made Peter mad. And so he kidnapped her daughter, Jane.
Which may even be what Boy wants in the younger Xenomorph. Though I do think it will grow pretty quickly, but it's a theory, mate, and we've been killing it at the moment. Just like the story though, Boy doesn't want his lost boys to grow up and they're stuck like this forever. He can wipe the memories and basically have them constantly repeat this period of their lives. Wendy then says,
All this time, we've been afraid of them. But I think they should be afraid of us.
I wouldn't necessarily agree they were scared of Boy and his staff though, and this is mainly due to the fact that they were indoctrinated and brainwashed that their maker is the be-all and end-all. But it does show how screwed they are. Kirsch, Adam, and the other synths can't attack due to their programming, but these kids have children's minds inside a machine. Once they overcome the indoctrination, they're deadly to anyone who slighted them. We saw that with Nibs last week, and they have the agency that machines like Adam don't. Wendy then gives an ominous look to the camera like a synth Jim Halpert. She knows she's being watched and has full control of the network. Now, I did think it was disappointing how they didn't really explain her powers and she kind of just becomes a Wendy Sue. They might explain it in other seasons, but for now, she can talk to the Xenomorphs and control machines, whereas the other synths can't. And she can just do it because she can do it. Don't ask questions. Boy is completely unaware of this and also has no idea why she can pick up on the Xenomorphs' communication. Which, yeah, I would have loved to have seen why she can and the other synths can't, but again, they don't really develop it. Before breaking out though, she then calls in the Xenomorph. This is across a hive network, which is why I can hear her. She may have even projected her voice via the speakers outside, as she has complete control of the facility. Looks so cool though, as it begins to emerge and we get Wendy laid over the top of it. This shot was used heavily in the trailers and it's an amazing way to show it coming from the abyss. Wendy then shows she's now in charge by turning off the cameras. Kirsch assures Boy that they have their own power in the lab, but he's clearly had enough of Boy's shit and starts to clap back. Boy has fully lost control of the situation and really it's all his fault. He could have just kept on with the hybrids on their own and perfected them and basically had these immortal bodies that everyone would have flocked to. The aliens would have inevitably tore Weyland Yutani apart from the inside because they always do, but the fact that Boy took the creatures actually saved Yutani in the long run.
Brain the size of a planet. Why don't you grow some balls? You want to fuck with me, Yutani, huh?
Let's fucking go!
Which reminded me a lot of Scarface in one of the final scenes where he's all high and wanting to take on the world.
You wanna fuck with me? Okay.
You wanna play rough? Okay. No. Say hello to my little friend!
Wendy then messes with the feed and Boy calls everyone morons. He then callously asks the soldier,
how do you feel about your eyes?
Showing that at this point, his plan's spiraling out of plan and he just wants to do whatever he can. Because yeah, I doubt anyone in the world is like, my eyes, mate, bloody sick of them, get rid of them. Unless, of course, you have an eye infection, or which I have been through and I would have done anything to have my eye, Boy. He really is like a child pulling wings off a fly, and in the end, his vindictive side wins out and he wants to put it in Joe. He believes that he's chosen someone weak, but ultimately we know Joe's a survivor. His sister also wouldn't stand for it, and it's him further going off the deep end. Wendy then broadcasts herself into Dame's room and plays the kids' interviews. She repeats,
"We'll be okay. Won't we? Won't we?"
It's clearly Wendy manipulating the footage, as Wendy says, "Won't we?" very ominously. It taps into Dame's guilt over failing the kids, especially after she said the dead children are not something they take lightly, ever. Dame has failed the kids though, as well as her husband. She opted to erase the memory of Nibs, which has led to this uprising, and seems to just want to stay with them, even if she has to hurt them. It's why, in the end, she's also in the prison with the rest of the adults. She may have helped create them, but she barely checked in with them, and would never stand up to Boy. Also, love how we get Nibs saying she has mixed emotions.
"I'm not really sure. I've got mixed emotions."
Which, yeah, kind of sets up her instability. Cutting to Joe and Morrow, the latter wakes up saying,
"It's the best I'm gonna feel all day. Let me enjoy it."
Yeah, mate, it really is. The pair are together again after Morrow saved his life at the crash site. Morrow has got an almighty shiner though, and he says,
"It's a yesterday conversation. I don't look back."
I feel like this plays into his name, as he's always looking forward to tomorrow. However, we saw with his daughter's stuff that he did in fact reminisce. So though he paints himself out almost like an unfeeling machine, he does have this side to him. Though he lets Severi die, I did feel like he'd lost all hope at that point. That was just him moving on, but I do think he genuinely cared about the crew, at least at some point. Morrow also says,
"How's the lung?"
which is exactly the same thing that Boy asked Joe.
Yeah, how's the new lung?
Both did it in a belittling manner, and both kind of play up how they saved Joe's life. Morrow stopped the Xenomorph from killing him, and Boy gave him a new lung. As we know though, Morrow continued with the Xenomorph and it got free, and Boy used the lung to create another creature. So it's not really something Joe should be grateful for. He smiles when he talks about a rush, and says, "Feels good, doesn't it?" I think that Morrow may end up as a hybrid down the line, as he wants to be more than human. The guilt and sorrow that he feels for his daughter will possibly be something that can eventually be erased. In episode 2, he said of the Sins how he wished to be a machine, as being human comes with a lot of pain. He clearly wants to get rid of his humanity, and that's something that can be done to the hybrids. Morrow talks about the high price he paid for being saved by Yutani, and that everything comes with a cost. Saying everything doesn't begin to cover it, we know he's lost not only time with his daughter, but also 65 years of his life. So it's like, what is he even living for at the moment? Joe had to do what Adam/Boy asked of him, or he would have had to pay the cost for his new lung and lose access to his sister. Morrow also had a full ride scholarship for his daughter, but ultimately it just led to more pain. So they both highlight the Fautian Deals and how you never really get what you want. On the flip side of this, Morrow and Boy both want the specimens for their own gain. One wants to use them and make new unknown horrors, while one wants to give them to his corporate overlords. Just the absolute worst type of co-worker you can have. Proper Randall from Recess, this guy. Joining the soldiers, we then hear they want to get to the armory and stack up with the big guns. They've clearly realized the weapons they've got are ineffective against the Xenomorph and want something more powerful. I did also wonder if Boy purposely gave them less impactful ones, because they could potentially damage the synths. Last week they talked about them being the merchandise, and had they shot them on the dock, then yeah, would have cost like $12 billion.
We're down to our last buck. How do you say give me some change in Portuguese?
Muito obrigado.
It's too late.
Obrigado.
There they go.
Ominously, they then head to the lift, which gave me major Shining vibes. The kids earlier said that they were ghosts, and Wendy is of course a name that also comes from the story. The kids basically prank them that the lift's about to self-destruct, and it leads to a very hilarious scene. Cutting to different feeds, I love how Kirsch is just sitting there carrying on with his work. Contrasting this though, we have Dame Sylvia, who's absolutely going through it. Haunted by echoes of the past, she's racked with guilt. It's like some sort of Edgar Allan Poe story, similar to The Telltale Heart. Wendy then finally cuts to her brother as Smee asks if she's mad at him. He rightfully says that Nibs killed someone though, and implies that Joe was right to shoot her. It's here that we then get a sort of flashback where Joe reads a letter from her. It seems to be really early days in her chemo though, as she still has hair. It mirrors the scene with Morrow and the Maginot in episode 5, and there we saw him remember his daughter and read from her letters. As mentioned, he seemingly had to do awful things to ensure she had the best possible chance at life. He's killed since, done lots of bad things on the Maginot, and in the end his daughter's just died in a fire. Joe has also seemingly done bad things under the contract with Prodigy. While his letters read out, we can see his squad seem to put down protests by the citizens. Boy rules over them and they likely have zero agency. Democracy is dead, they can't vote or oust him, and in the end they basically live in this huge company town. Joe was victim to this as well, as he was also told he couldn't leave, which has likely happened to these citizens. Protests happen at a checkpoint and it reminded me a lot of The Last of Us. While he's a medic, he is still complicit in helping put the boot on the working man's neck. We know that Joe's dad was sick and he was away when both his sister and dad needed him the most. Just like Morrow, a loved one died while he was out working in this late stage capitalist hellscape. In the letter, we hear how Wendy says she wishes he could come home, but she's just a kid and has no idea he's locked into this construct for life.
Don't forget, you're here forever.
Both the families wanted their loved one back from work, but that's not the way the world works. The Prodigy staff's day then gets a lot worse as she unlocks their cell after remembering how much she loves her brother. Morrow plays it cool, asks for a cigar, and then knocks out the guard. This is something we've seen him smoke a lot, and it plays into how he promises to burn the place to the ground, which makes me wonder, is he gonna like cover the place in petrol and smoke a cigar and throw it and basically set fire to the island? What a great scene if they steal it, and well, one credit. For the meantime though, he just doesn't seem to want to hurt the kids directly. He just wants his toys back. The guard's uniform here, namely the cap, also looks a lot like what the Marines wore in the briefing scene during Aliens. We then get a badass shot as he basically smashes off the hand restraint and loads up the gun. Kirsch is his first target and he heads to the lab, which is where we see the body of Tootles. Rather than being buried though, he's just pushed out the way like a broken iPhone or something. Now, I think Kirsch might actually be trying to fix his mind. Last week he said theoretically it might be possible, and it does appear to be that sort of device. Morrow then arrives and Kirsch lets off a shot which damages the glass holding the plant. This escapes, so it's a nice split-second shot to let us know how that happened. The fight is great though, and I love the way they have Morrow fight with pretty much nothing but his strong hand. Now my strong hand! He ends up smashing Kirsch like the like button, and we see the white blood dripping out his mouth. Morrow then rattles off about John Henry. Known as the most powerful and fastest man who worked the railroad, he apparently raced against a steam-powered rock drill. Henry won, but ultimately his heart gave out from stress. Now, how this could apply to the show is that Morrow is desperate to prove he's better than Kirsch. Eventually, I think this will come at the cost of his life though, and I did think he died here trying to show he was better. The plant escapes, and then Kirsch puts him in a sleeper hold, but ultimately he survives. This could play into the Asimov law of robotics and how synths are actually unable to harm humans. And yeah, I breathed a sigh of relief when he was still alive, because I did not want to say goodbye just yet. Also, all that milk on your clothes, Kirsch, you're gonna need some new ones. Why not check out our merch store right below the video? There we've got our alien-inspired clothes and have this lovely isolation one that you can see right behind me here. We've also just launched 2 brand new ones as well. The first of these is our Wendy synth one, which is based off some of the concept art from the show. We also have one of my favourite designs, which is the bloody sheepmate with the eye. Lots of discounts on there, and the more you buy, the more you get off. For example, you buy multiple shirts, you get 20% off, and it all goes towards helping videos like this get made, so thank you for all your support. Now, I love how we cut to Wendy watching the fight, looking bored as the battle goes to the ground. Yeah, which I agree, mate, the ground fights are very dull. It's here that Boy then comes in to taunt his hybrids. We get a long ominous shot of the corridor akin to the opening moments of Alien. We then watch as the xenomorph heads back into the facility via the waste pipe. The creature used the vents on the Nostromo and the pipelines at Hadley's Hope. So it's just nice to continue the idea they use tunnels and pipe work to get around. Boy's very smug though, and he mentions how the kids are sad and locked in a cage with no one to play with. Curly then calls him a liar and finally shows she's breaking free of his control. Wendy, however, snaps her fingers and opens up the door, which instantly scares Boy. However, he does also seem a little impressed by it. Snapping your fingers is a command that often shows who's really in control and a way to basically cut through the noise in a minuscule gesture. I'm sure you've all heard the phrase, I could do this with just a click of my fingers, and it's a great way to show dominance that, yeah, Wendy definitely possesses here. Also potentially why they had the snap in Marvel, but moving on. Now, it's here that we get some major backstory for the boy genius. He reveals that he in fact killed his father.
When I was little, my daddy was a drunk.
which reminded me of one of Joker's monologues in The Dark Knight. Boy looked down on him as he was an alcoholic that abused him, and this thrust him forward to make his first synth at the age of 6. Turns out that Adam Eanes was said machine, and it's implied that he killed Boy's father. Now when Morrow looked over his history, we could see some parts of an article. This said that Boy had been in a car crash which had led to the death of his ... which then left a mystery in the air. The journalist wondered why he'd not just used one of his synths to drive, which was something that the public kind of speculated about. However, if this was his father, then it dates his dad's death after his work had already began. So it might not have even been his dad in that article, and I feel like he may have had a hand in other people's deaths. After all, we see how cavalier that he is. He might have even kept Adam around and then faked his death to get the reins of the company. But what we learn is that this new toy became his father, and he kept up the charade. Mainly because no one would take a 6-year-old seriously in the world of business. Adam was the figurehead while he did all the work in the background. Presumably this was until he became of age and then took over. But this explains why he's obsessed with children's minds, as he knows from personal experience how good their imaginations are. It also explains his disdain for adults and why he wants people to stay as kids forever. Also wonder if Adam's identical looking to his dad, and then they basically staged a car crash. He took over and then they were like, yeah, it must have just been his father the whole time. But we're getting off track there, and what we do know is the mask is slipping heavily, as he says the kids are just floor models, and basically gives a sales speech. They've just been a way to make money from this entire time, and he treated them well as long as they behaved. The minute the money started to be at risk, he locked them up and then started berating them. He's become abusive, just like his own father, and in a twist of irony, they've now replaced him. Nibs then just goes a bit mental and it all kicks off. This scene though might be one of my favorites in the show, and Wendy says,
"Run."
The kids are having fun with it as Smee pretends to be a beast, which is something that Nibs has also done to scare the humans in the last 2 episodes. It also reminds me heavily of Sid's toys in Toy Story. Each one of the kids then goes and gets revenge on the one who hurt them. Nibs goes after Sylvia's revenge for deleting her memory, and Wendy goes after Boy, while Smee and Slightly take on Kirsch and Morrow. Curly goes to take out the guards and then says that her name's Jane, reclaiming who she once was. We also get the lights set to strobe mode, with strobe lights being a big thing in the Alien franchise. The music is superb though, and it sounds a lot like the climax in Aliens. She says no one touches her brother, and we then cut to him in Wendy's room. We see Adam hitting the Alfred Hitchcock pose, and he's extremely intimidating. He once more offers a deal that seems great on the surface, but ultimately it's got a hidden side to it.
I think you'll like what he has to say.
The last time the pair had a tete-a-tete, Joe was forced to stay on the island and observe his sister. And yet, this deal isn't much better. The eye forcibly inserting itself into a person also fits well with the original movie's theme of forced birth. We then join Slightly and Smee, and I love how they pass by the mold, which we can see has now grown even more. The xenomorphs also running rampant in the corridors, while Nibs continues her therapy session. It builds off the back of last time they were here, and is sort of a continuation of her attack. Arriving at Kirsch, he then hands over what sort of looks like rosary beads. These are in fact what comes from out the synths, and they surrounded Ash and Alien after he was destroyed. We also saw them with the damaged bishop in Alien 3. I think though, because of their look, they have a lot of religious symbolism to them, and ultimately playing to the themes of gods and those who are held captive by them. Morrow ultimately tells Slightly he didn't hurt his mother, but it doesn't seem like he cares, showing his further detachment from humanity. That's all he was bothered about last week, but now he's ready to deal out vengeance. Joe is then taken to Boy's office, and we see the sheep chambers open. Adam says they're not monsters and that they know his sister has rights, which is obviously a lie. Joe then quips that his lung is free, but they're gonna take everything else, which kind of plays off his conversation with Morrow. But yeah, it all kicks off, and the Occellus eyes up its victim. Eyes up its victim, I said. Eyes up his victim. What do you mean you don't think that's funny? As mentioned though, Joe is a survivor. He's gonna make it. I love the way the sheep just drops to the ground as the eye escapes, and Joe makes a break for the chamber. However, it attempts to go in the feeding hole, which is where we see the hay from last week. Using its slingshot abilities, it goes for his face, and Wendy's able to break in just in time. However, Adam's there to throw down. Reminds me heavily of the first Alien movie, and there we saw Ash fight against Ripley before the rest of the crew came and helped her defeat the synth. I do feel like Adam was programmed to be able to harm humans, which in the end is how he hurt Boy's dad. Clearly though, being born an adult has made him dislike kids. Adam says he didn't see the point in creating forever children and couldn't stand an eternity of "Are we there yet?" Whew, and as a parent, mate, I agree. Atom Eanes for president. Like, the minute we get out the driveway, mate, my kids are like, "Are we there yet? Are we there yet? Why aren't we there yet? We'll be there soon. We'll be there soon. Don't make a robot kill me though. I love you, kids." Luckily, our girl hits an almighty volley and knocks out the Occellus for now.
Go!
Now, we then see she's unlocked a brand new superpower as she manages to stop Adam in his tracks. Something which I feel is taken right out of Westworld.
I need assistance.
Freeze all motor functions.
He's also on the network like every other piece of tech in the building, and thus able to be controlled. Again, like Westworld, she says she gets to say what happens now, and you don't get to hurt us anymore. In that show, Dolores became self-aware and helped the rest of the host robots rise up and fight against the humans. Wendy is now doing the same thing, and I'm not at all mad that Noah Hawley's lifting stuff from that show, because yeah, at this point, it's difficult to think of a better show discussing AI. Not to get too spoiler on that series, but latter seasons of Westworld also had similar themes of human minds being put into machines. I also wonder if they're going to put her on a similar path to Dolores, and that as she gets into the real world, her powers start evolving. Like, if she can access networks here without issue, then she might be able to do it to others. The siblings then discuss Joe shooting Nibs, and he justifies it by saying she was hurting his friends. They basically talk about how they're supposed to be helping people, and Wendy asks,
"Are you saying Nibs isn't people?"
She's furious at what happened and says, "Maybe you should call me it." At this point, he then belittles her by saying that the world is complicated and she sounds like a child.
I didn't make the world. You sound like a child.
To him, she has a very simplistic idea of the world. To her, you must be really nice, hit the thumbs up, do good things, but in reality, the world doesn't work like that. We saw earlier how Joe was at the site of a protest and he was stuck in this awful job despite wanting to go to medical school, which is where he could have helped people. To him, that's the way the world works and things are just complicated.
Don't say complicated.
People will be left powerless, and I think her pushing Adam over represents how she has the ability to destroy everything. Joe then says how the xenomorphs see them as food. This is a line which is very similar to something Kirsch said earlier in the season. He said how humans didn't see themselves as food anymore, but there's always something bigger and stronger out there that will eat you if it's given the chance. But Wendy thinks she can tame them, create world peace, and basically have you chilling with your alien bro. Ultimately, I don't think that will happen though, and I think she's very naive. We then see Boy skipping through the compound wearing a bulletproof vest. Obviously, you know, that'll be useless, mate, and he then comes face to face with the xenomorph. I love this scene and how we see it on the ceiling and then get all the flashing lights. This is what Boy's quest for a conversation's led to, and he ends up on the floor having just pissed his pants. Wendy and Joe also enter the haunts. This is very akin to the original score for Alien. The soldiers then come in and the creature rips them apart. In the lab, we then see Joe's squad mates enter and get this little callback to Aliens.
Stay frosty. We're all in strung out shape. But stay frosty.
I love how you can see Siberian has a cast in her arm as well, as obviously it was damaged from fighting the hybrids in the last episode. Xenomorph tables are also completely bent out of shape, having become more and more melted as time goes on. The corpse of the creature is still smoking away, and it's just going to keep eating into the floor. The plant then ends up swallowing Siberian, and it sort of acts like a giant stingray. It crushes her up, and is basically a Venus flytrap on steroids. The guard is then knocked out by Curly, and we journey to the beach to see the eye infecting Arthur. I cannot wait for season 2, and I love how it actually looked like a normal eye. I feel like Dame might not even realize he's dead at first, and then we'll finally see the truth and be absolutely horrified. In the end, the Yutani troops swoop in, and Wendy walks around the cell. She berates Dame for putting 6 kids in the ground and ultimately accepts her death, and kind of that she's grown into something more. I love how Kirsch is just conked out. Eanes has his hands tied behind his back, literally, and Morrow is once more tied up, with extra measures this time. Wendy says Boy was never Peter Pan because he was never a boy, he's always been a man. And I'm not a rapper. He's a mean, angry little man who's let hate consume him. Wendy wants to heal the world with love and embrace every form of life. Whether it's a scorpion at the start or the xenomorph now, she's going to try and be better. We close out wondering how long the piece is gonna last, and they say that they want to rule. Boy laughs, but Cho and Dame look very apprehensive. I think deep down they know that Wendy's views are far too simplistic, and ultimately there's no way to keep a lid on this. Ultimately, it will all come crashing down, and we close out to Animal by Pearl Jam. It's a banging track from their 1994 record Versus. This was a follow-up to their breakout hit album 10. Thankfully, after last week, this might be one of the easiest tracks to discuss. I've put the lyrics on screen, so I'm not just reading them, but they are very, very straightforward. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against 1 is quite clearly 5 hybrids versus Boy Cavalier. At 39:36 in the episode, we see the hybrids with Boy in the middle of them. The album was also originally going to be called 5 Against 1. They saw it as the 5 band members against the world and the industry, and were trying to retain their soul and selves, much like the kids are doing here. In the end, they win the fight against their corporate overlords, and if only Pearl Jam would have done the same thing to Ticketmaster. The lyrics then go on to say, "I'd rather be with an animal." In a way, it's what Wendy said to Joe, as she'd rather be with the alien xenomorph. They have no ulterior motives like the complicated humans. The album cover also features an Angora goat, and you can make a loose connection between that and the sheep who had the Occellus in its eye socket. And thus ends our music analysis. Would you like to subscribe to my music analysis channel? In the end, that closes out the season, and I'd of course love to hear your thoughts on it below. In the end, I think it was a pretty solid start, and though I had my problems with some of the characterizations, I loved some of the things explored here. Though it started off as a very by the number, like shot-for-shot recreation of the original, I like that Hawley evolved things and took it in a new direction. And ultimately, I am excited to see where we're going with it. Sure, it might not always hit a home run, there might be some things I'm like, but ultimately, this is such an interesting series that has just left me wanting more and being constantly in awe. And I'm not a rapper. So yeah, I'd rather someone take big swings like this, not necessarily hit a home run every single time, but do something really creative that asks lots and lots of questions. I do want to do a video discussing more of my predictions on season 2 as well, so make sure you keep an eye out for that, and make sure you subscribe because yes, by popular demand, we will be going back through the Alien series again and updating all our breakdowns with our brand new presentation style. We're also working on Alien vs Predator Requiem at the moment, which killed me, but yeah, that's going to be coming soon as well. Just make sure you keep an eye out. If you want to have a rough idea of when we're dropping that, then make sure you check us out on Instagram at Heavy Spoilers. Also, if you've enjoyed the breakdowns and you feel like giving, we've got a membership program, 99 cents a month, less than $12 a year, and it will give you early access to at least 1 breakdown a week. It just massively helps us out. We'd really appreciate anyone who signed up, and hopefully, you know, if you just chip in a little 99 cents a month, you cancel it, that's absolutely fine, but it will just go such a long way towards helping the channel remain doing this sort of stuff. So yeah, thank you for that, and on screen right now, we've got a breakdown I think you guys are going to love. If not though, thank you again so much for sitting through this series with me. I've loved seeing you guys week by week, and yeah, I hope you've had as much fun as I have. Out of the way though, thank you for sitting through the videos. I've been your host Paul, as always, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.